Imagine surviving one of the most catastrophic injuries in galactic history, only to wake up inside a machine that was designed to keep you in pain. As hard as that is to picture, that's exactly what Darth Vader's armor was. Not just a life support system, not just a weapon, a deliberate instrument of suffering, engineered by a Sith Lord who understood that a man in constant agony is a man who never looks back. Today, we're breaking down every component of Darth Vader's suit, what it did, what it cost him, and why it was built the way it was. Start with the helmet because it's where most people's eyes go, and for good reason. After his duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar, Vader's respiratory system was destroyed. The heat from the lava hadn't just burned the surface of his body, it had scorched his mouth, his esophagus, and both lungs. That damage alone was fatal without immediate intervention. The triangular mouthpiece that became his most recognizable feature housed a complex breathing apparatus that regulated his oxygen intake and filtered out contaminants, dust, toxins, anything that would further compromise what remained of his pulmonary function. The air he breathed was as pure as technology could make it, because anything less would kill him. The sound that apparatus produced became something else entirely. That mechanical breathing, constant, rhythmic, inescapable, preceded Vader into every room he entered. It wasn't incidental, it was presence. A warning that arrived before he did. His hearing was similarly reconstructed. When his body caught fire on Mustafar, the damage reached his ear canals, leaving him with profound hearing loss. The helmet's auditory sensors restored that function, artificially filtered but functional. They could also be tuned to specific frequencies, giving Vader the ability to intercept transmissions most beings would never detect. His vision was the same story. His eyes survived the duel largely intact, but the suit overlaid a built-in visual interface regardless, providing night vision, infrared, and additional tactical data. Every sensory experience Vader had of the outside world was processed and mediated through technology. Nothing reached him directly, nothing was unfiltered. A neural interface connected the helmet and the full suit to his brain, allowing him to control most of its functions mentally rather than manually. On a practical level, this was necessary. Adjusting a suit that complex by hand constantly would have been unworkable. The drawbacks were significant. The helmet required an airtight seal to function, which meant it could not be removed outside of a hyperbaric chamber. The neck brace that secured it was designed to dig into his skin, and it did continuously. The physical geometry of the helmet restricted his peripheral vision in combat, a limitation he compensated for through the Force rather than through any technological solution. The bodysuit beneath the armor was a multi-layered construction of durasteel and plastoid, resistant to blaster fire and capable of absorbing lightsaber contact, though repeated strikes in the same location would eventually penetrate. In practice, few enemies survived long enough to test that ceiling. The inner lining was dense with biomechanical sensors feeding data back to the helmet's systems. It also contained healing agents, compounds that managed Vader's injuries just enough to prevent deterioration, without actually repairing anything. Meanwhile, the suit rubbed and chafed continuously against burned skin. Needles delivered injections into his body on a regular basis. The physical experience of simply existing inside the suit was one of unrelenting low-grade punishment, punctuated by sharper episodes when systems malfunctioned. The gauntlets and gloves were built from similar materials, with the gloves running slightly thicker to withstand the wear of combat and general use. They could absorb repeated blaster shots, enough that observers sometimes believed Vader could catch bolts barehanded without damage. He couldn't, but he never corrected the impression. A rumor like that cost nothing and brought considerable leverage. Vader lost his right arm to Count Dooku at the First Battle of Geonosis. He lost the rest of his limbs to Obi-Wan on Mustafar. All four were replaced with cybernetics. The mechanical limbs were fully functional, strong, precise, capable. They were also heavy, oversized relative to Anakin Skywalker's natural proportions, and never fully fused to his organic body. They were removed regularly, so Vader could spend recovery time in a Bacta tank, and that cycle of removal and reattachment meant his body never completed the integration process. The result was persistent phantom limb pain, the nervous system registering injury where no biological tissue remained. An electro-pneumatic assistance system was built into the suit to compensate for the weight and the biomechanical awkwardness of the limbs, giving him functional mobility despite the burden. But the weight was always there. He carried it everywhere, in every sense. The chest panel was the operational center of the entire suit, controlling roughly 90% of its systems. It managed life support, power distribution, and respiratory regulation. It could adjust oxygen flow for different atmospheric environments and modulate temperature for operation on planets at either extreme. It gave Vader limited access to pain management, the dosage carefully constrained, never enough to provide real relief, just enough to keep him functional. A secondary power core in his belt backed up the chest panel in the event of primary failure. The probes embedded in the panel pressed pressed into his torso constantly. The entire system was wired directly into his nervous system, meaning damage to the suit translated to physical pain in his body, and there was no manual override. If the chest panel failed, Vader suffocated. That single vulnerability made it the most critical point on his body in any engagement, which he knew and his enemies eventually learned. Because the suit sealed him off from the environment completely, even basic biological functions required engineering. Vader could eat orally when inside his hyperbaric chamber, though the scarring in his throat made that process painful enough that he often bypassed it entirely, taking nutrients intravenously instead. Waste was handled by built-in processing systems, catheter and recyclers, that required regular cleaning and maintenance by medical droids. Given how compromised his body already was, infection was a constant risk, and the maintenance wasn't optional. Here is the part that reframes everything else. The technology existed to build Vader a suit that was comfortable. Palpatine chose not to use it. When Sidious oversaw the construction of the suit after Mustafar, he deliberately specified older, less refined technology. Not because better options weren't available, but because the pain served a purpose. Constant suffering deepened Vader's connection to the dark side of the Force. It kept him immersed in rage and anguish, and critically, it buried everything else. The memories of Padme, the weight of what he had done, anything that might have pulled him back toward the light. A man in that much pain doesn't have the space to feel hope. Vader understood this, at least eventually, and his response was to leave it alone. He had the knowledge and the technical aptitude to improve his own suit, and he largely chose not to. Physical agony was preferable to the alternative, the silence and everything that would fill it. Darth Vader's suit is one of the most recognizable images in cinema, but the closer you look at what it actually was and what it did to the man inside it and why it was built that way, the more it stops being armor and starts being something else entirely. It was a monument to failure, a reminder worn on the body every minute of every day of what Anakin Skywalker had lost and what he had become. That's why it worked as a symbol, and that's why when he finally took it off, it meant everything.